Every country tells stories about itself. Some are inspiring, some are incomplete, and some are deliberately left out. On this show, we pull back the curtain, question the narratives, and explore the people, policies, and history shaping the America that we live in today. No spin, no filters, just honest conversation. I'm your host, Breezy, with my co-host, Des the Diva, and this is America, No Filter. What's going on, everybody? It's your girl, Breezy, with my homegirl,
Des the Diva.
Welcome back, Des. It's good to see you.
Thank you. I'm
You
glad to
look
be
gorgeous,
back.
girl.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and tonight we have a very, very special guest. Our guest today is Professor Terry Brock, a historical and public archaeologist at Wake Forest University, whose work focuses on uncovering the lives of enslaved communities through archaeology. His research explores how archaeology, public history, and descendant engagement can help tell more of a complete and honest American story. So welcome, Terry. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm excited to be here, and it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you since we were at Montpelier together.
That was an amazing time. I honestly wasn't quite sure what to expect. I know Keenan had given me a little bit of a rundown, but it's one thing to tell somebody what it's going to be like, and it's another thing to experience it for yourself. And I have to say, it has been quite a transformative experience for me, and it's stuck with me. Didn't know how much it would resonate when I was there, but at every corner, there was something that just resonated with me in a way, whether it ties back to my own personal family and life stories, to unanswered questions, to just learning more about the humanity of the enslaved. It was a very eye-opening experience, and I'm so grateful that I was able to be a part of it, that you pulled in Keenan last year for this experience. As soon as he told me about it last year, I was like, wait a minute, why didn't you tell me about this in advance? And it was fantastic to be a part of it. So thank you so much. Tell us, how did you find your way to this work?
To the work, gosh, how did I find my way to the work? Well, I fell in love with archaeology when I was an undergraduate at Kalamazoo College, a tiny liberal arts school up in the state of Michigan, where I'm from. I had an amazing opportunity to go and study abroad in Rome, Italy, and then went back with a faculty member and did my first archaeological excavation out there, and just fell in love with the discipline. It ticked a lot of boxes for me of things I like to do. It's physical. I was a college athlete. I played sports, so being able to do something that I used my body while I was doing was really important to me, but it was also intellectual. So I also got to use my brain while I was using my body at the same time. So I really loved that part of it. And it's a team. You can't do archaeology by yourself.
That's true.
Right? You have to work with other people. You just can't. It's not a solo pursuit. And everything I've ever done in my life has been part of a team. Whether that's playing sports, or that's working on a field crew, or that's singing in a choir. Like, these are all things that it requires more than one person to do. And I just love the camaraderie that comes along with teamwork and that feeling of building a community and a group and working together on something. So those are really three important components for me. The thing that I didn't like about classical archaeology, meaning work in ancient Rome, ancient Greece, was that not only did I have to learn Latin, I also had to learn ancient Greek, and I had to learn French, and I had to learn German, and I was going to have to learn Italian if I wanted to work in Italy.
Yeah.
And I could not. I just couldn't. I don't know how I passed my Latin comprehensive exams. I can't do any of it anymore. And so I went to Michigan State University after I graduated from Kalamazoo College. And that was really, I went on an other excavation. And this one was on Michigan State's campus. It was excavation of their first dormitory, which burned down in 1876, I believe. And all of a sudden, and it was right there. I mean, we just took off the sod, and there was this old building right in the middle of campus. And that was when I learned that archaeology existed in the United States, where I only needed to learn English. And so so all of a sudden I realized, oh, I can do this here, right? And that it's a recent story,
Mm-hmm.
right? That this is a past that's recent. And I grew up in East Lansing. So that excavation was extra exciting for me because I grew up on that campus. My dad is a physics faculty there. Right, I grew up walking and being on that campus and going to football games and all of the things that you do when you live in a college town. And so, in a strange way, I was kind of a descendant, right? A community member who had an extra stake in that project because it was about a place that I was going to school and that had put a roof over my head for my entire life and that I was really a part of. And so, at the same time that I was doing that, I was also working on a degree in history at Michigan State, another bachelor's degree. And I took some classes with a wonderful scholar named Dinah Ramey Berry. Dr. Berry is now, she's no longer at Michigan State, but she's written a couple of amazing books, Swing the Sickle Before the Harvest is Ripe, and Price per Pounds of Flesh, both incredible books about African American history, particularly history of African American women. And she's now a dean at I'm going to get this wrong, a very big school in California.
That word.
I can't quite remember which one, but and she really. So I was simultaneously learning that I could do archaeology in the United States, right? And that I could study something that was in the recent past and that was connected to people who lived today, right? And then I'm taking these classes in African American history, and I'm working with Dr. Berry as a research assistant. And I'm sitting there in these classes, and I'm seeing where archaeology could fit in, right? And that was the click. That was the last box I needed to be checked, was how can I do work that is going to have an impact in the present moment, right?
Yeah.
Because when I was an undergrad, that was an important thing that we learned at Kalamazoo College, was you're supposed to be a member of your community and you're supposed to be an active member of your community, right? And I worked at a domestic assault shelter and things like that. I wanted that to be a part of my life. And as amazing as doing archaeology in Rome was, it was hard for me to see how studying something from 400 BC was connecting to 2000,
Gotcha.
right?
Right now. Yeah.
Whereas this, all of a sudden, it just clicked. So that was really what got me interested in it. And I ended up going to Michigan State for graduate school because I worked on that project with a whole bunch of faculty members at Michigan State. So they all got to know me, and I got accepted into their graduate program and started doing my work at a museum in Southern Maryland called Historic St. Mary's City, which the focus of that museum is on 17th century Maryland, where it was the first capital of Maryland. But I worked there. The director of archaeology both happened to know my grandfather.
Small world. Okay.
Very. And he got his PhD from Michigan State University. So actually, I had a faculty member who connected me to him, and then my grandmother connected me to him. And so I ended up visiting there, and then their focus was all on the city, the 17th century city that no longer exists. Capital moves to Annapolis after the Protestant Revolution in the late 17th century, and it becomes a slave plantation. That all the buildings disappear and it becomes a plantation. So they'd done all this archaeology on this plantation because they were trying to study what was underneath the plantation, which was the 17th century city.
Oh.
But they'd collected all this data and had all this information, and they'd done their due diligence by it. They hadn't just cast it aside. But my dissertation work ended up being studying and learning about that plantation, and in particular the people who were enslaved on that plantation by the Broom family, and trying to understand what their lives were like during slavery, but then also that plantation was active from 1840 through the Civil War and into the post-emancipation period. And there was one quarter that was a saddlebag style home like we saw at Montpelier, with a central chimney and two family-sized homes on either side. That building was occupied until the 1960s.
Wow.
So it was an amazing opportunity to learn about not only what was life like during slavery, but how did life change and how did life stay the same following emancipation and all the way into the 20th century. So that was the first project that I really did on lives of the enslaved community. And it was in the context of a museum that focused on public history and public archaeology and telling historical stories. So we built the internet was still,
It
it was
was the
new.
cloud stage at the time.
It was Web 2.0, not whatever
Dial-up?
web we're in now.
Is it
And
dial-up stage?
and And so we made an online exhibit about that. And then the building that was still standing is now an exhibit. It's based on a lot of the research that I did while I was working there. So that was also that work. And then also the work I was doing at Michigan State, which was still doing work on campus. I continued to do that work through graduate school. Really made it clear to me, oh, I need to do this work with not just with other archaeologists, but I need to do it with the public. Right. That there's the way that this impact is going to happen, if it's going to have an impact, is by doing it outward facing, not inward facing. Right. Academia, we all have a tendency to just do the stuff that we're interested in, right? Answer the questions that we're curious about, and then share that with all of our academic friends. And then we just all talk to each other. And that information doesn't get outside of our little circle. And so by working at a museum, and I started doing a lot of social media. I think I sent one of the first tweets from an archaeology site, right? Realizing that there's this whole community out there that's really interested in all of this work. And it's exciting work, and it's tangible work, and it's one of the few academic disciplines where I think, particularly that study the past, where the process is the most exciting part to so many people, right? You were helping us collect data, right? For a historian, that's looking at the primary sources, right? That's not even close to the final product of an archaeological excavation, right? It's the data collection part, and so that's but it often is the most meaningful part, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what got me into it. And then I'd met Matt Reeves, the director of archaeology at Montpelier, while I was in graduate school, and I just kind of followed him around. Whenever there was a conference that I was going to go to, I emailed him. I was like, I'm going to this conference. Are you going to this conference? We should hang out. Here's the paper I'm giving. What are you giving? And eventually he had a job opening that happened to coincide right with when I was finishing my PhD. So I applied, got the job, and I worked at Montpelier from 2014 until the summer of 2021. Yeah. So that was the short answer.
So what do people normally get wrong about the term archaeology? When they hear that, is there something that they think it is versus what it actually is? What do they misunderstand?
I think that there's a lot of things. I think that every journalist thinks that they've come up with the real witty beginning to their article about archaeology by referencing Indiana Jones. Right? It's every single article that's ever been written that I've been.
I have thought about
not just Indiana Jones.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I thought about.
Yep. So, yep. And most of us hate Nazis, and all of that, that all tracks. But one of my favorite pieces of online, I don't know if you've ever read McSweeney's. It's an online kind of humor magazine, but one of my favorite pieces on there is a mock tenure rejection letter for Indiana Jones from his faculty. He's really not a great archaeologist. At any rate, so that's this one misconception. And again, I think really another one is that all archaeology happens somewhere else, that it's happening in Rome, it's happening in Greece, right? It's only about stuff that happened thousands of years ago. When it's honest, it's happening every day in the United States, all over the place. We have laws that protect cultural heritage. If anything's federally permitted or funded, there's supposed to be environmental impact review. Archaeology is one of those potential impacts to make sure that cultural resources are not destroyed, right? So that your highway doesn't go through a Native American burial ground or something like that. So, and there's firms, 80% of archaeological employment in the United States is working for a private cultural resource management firm because of this entire regulatory system that exists. So I have colleagues who work not just in museums and not just at academic institutions, but work for these firms, work in government, right? I mean, if you think about it, I have colleagues who work on military bases.
Yeah.
Every time a shovel gets put in the ground at a military base, that is a federally funded shovel being used by a federally funded person. I did work at Camp Perry while I was in graduate school, which is it's a CIA.
Okay. Right. Okay. All right. I was
facility in Williamsburg. In Williamsburg.
Supposed to have heard of that, I guess.
Yeah. It was fun to joke with Carol about Camp Perry.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Carol worked for the CIA and she was on it.
Yes.
So on the program. But so there's just lots and lots of work that exists in that world. So I think another misconception would be also that it's not just a bunch of professors doing archaeology. There's a whole professional field that's committed to doing this work, and that we need, because we have really important laws that make sure we don't destroy important cultural heritage things that sometimes are ignored.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what can archaeologists reveal to us or tell us that documents often cannot? How is it different than written historical
Yeah,
records?
every piece of evidence we have about the past is fragmented. Every part,
Uh-huh.
right? We've made an assumption about historical records that somehow they are better or more accurate, or that they tell a complete story, and they don't. Right? They don't. I don't write down every minute of my day.
Well, true.
Right?
And
I
embellish, right? That happens too, right?
Right. Exactly. Well, and right, we all talk about our lives as if we're the center of the universe, and we observe the world that we live in through our specific right set of lived
Right.
experiences, biology, right? All of those things inform how we see the world and how we interpret the world, which means it's going to inform how we write down what we think about the world. If we have the privilege of being able to write,
That part.
right, and access to the tools that you need to write, and if you're lucky enough that the things you wrote down stick around, and that someone finds them and thinks they're important enough to study, right? So there's the historical record, the paper documentary record is extremely fragmented, and this is particularly true when we're thinking about and studying the lives of enslaved African Americans. And because we have the documents we do have pretty minimal, and often coming from the perspective of the enslaver, not the enslaved. And so that leaves us with very little evidence. The archaeological record is fragmented too, right?
Yeah.
Quite literally, right? Everything we found was broken. So I'm not by no means saying archaeology is perfect, but what I am saying is that the best way to study the past, I think, is to use all the resources that we have to do that work. So I look at historical documents all the time because they're a great resource, but I'm also looking at them a little bit differently. I look at them through a material lens, right? My focus as an archaeologist is studying the material culture, the stuff that human beings left behind, and trying to understand what those can tell us. And I just view historical documents as another piece of stuff, right, that we've left behind. So it's really important, I think, to consider all the different lines of evidence that we have, so that we can build as full a picture of the past as we can. So we look at still standing architectural structures to learn about those, right? When we went to James Monroe's house, right? When Wendy took us through the overseer's house, right? And you could sort of see how we can pick apart a building that's still standing and learn about the history of its life, and then therefore the history of the people who lived in it.
And the many times. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So and of course, like seeing how the historical record that said it was an overseer house doesn't tell the full story of that house, right? So that's just such a really important piece of studying. Archaeology is just one of those pieces, right? And it tends to give us more information about people that we don't have a written record for.
So my next question would be about oral history and how that ties in, right? Because I know that you guys are working very closely and very collaboratively with the descendants of
Uh-huh.
the enslaved at James Madison's Montpelier. And so, how has information from them, oral history from them, helped add more color, more flavor, more richness to the overall story that you're trying to uncover and tell?
Yeah, and it's not just that Montpelier works closely with the descendants. The descendants nominate 50% at minimum 50% of the Montpelier Foundation's executive board. So the descendants are not just a group of people that we like chit chat with,
Yeah, no,
right? They are part of a co-steward in how that organization is run. And it's the only presidential home in the country that is run that way. So it's a deeper relationship, right? Yeah, it's just another one of those, another piece, right? Another line of evidence that we can use to tie things together, right? So, like for example, one of the reconstructed buildings that we went into, I talked about the quartz crystals, right?
Right.
And which we found buried in one of the corners of one of the quarters, and then also a tumbler that we'd found wedged underneath one of the doorways, right? A number of things sort of buried in corners and thresholds. And I remember talking with a descendant at some point, and they're like, Grandma always used to put like salt in the corners of the house, and we didn't know why, right? Just like, but there was always just like random food in the things in the corners of the buildings, right? So that kind of, from as an archaeologist, right, it's like, oh, okay, not only do we have historical documentation that suggests this is a thing, we see this pattern happening at other, like, we're not the only archaeologists to have found these things, right? Like, we found one tumbler glass. I know some other sites where they have like rows of tumblers
Oh, wow.
covering the entire threshold. The idea being that bad spirits will get trapped in those tumblers before they get into the house, right? So this was just, right, that's just another piece of evidence for me to say, this is even more evidence, right? This is a practice that people are still doing, putting things in the corners of buildings, and we still see it. And so that's one way that we use historical archaeology to help us with interpreting things that we're finding, right? Like, it's really hard to say, oh, that's a spiritual practice, right? There's an archaeology joke that, like, if you find something and you can't explain it, you just kind of say, that must be ritual. Right? But you need that sort of multiple pieces of evidence to tie the thing you're seeing materially to a human behavior. And oral history does that, and historical documents help us with that. And I may see something at Montpelier, but not have a direct link to a human behavior. But we've got it at another site. We see the same thing, and they've got that link. Right? So then I can link to that to link, if that makes.
Yeah, no, one of the things that stood out to me was that story of the bead, right? That you guys initially thought or was like a ring or something.
Yeah, so we found a cornelian ring that was super exciting. We found it in the kitchen, and the south kitchen, so in the south yard. And the oral history connection was that Betty Kierce, who wrote the book The Other Madisons, and so she's the family griot. She's been carrying the story of her family all the way back to the 18th century when her family was enslaved. And her oral history says that she is a descendant of James Madison and enslaved cook at Montpelier. So, but I believe her family has a cornelian bead that has been passed down. And so the connection there was, we had these two cornelian stone artifacts, one found archaeologically, one that, or at least the family had talked about this cornelian bead. The amazing thing about the cornelian, that material, is that it's not something that you get here in the United States. You get it in Africa. Right? So that means that this bead and this ring came from Africa, probably on the finger or in the hair, right? Or on a necklace or something like that, on a person, on a ship, right? On a slave ship to the United States, and was then probably passed down, where then someone probably took it off while they were, I don't know, working in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
I know my mother always had a little dish, right, where she would take her wedding ring off and put it in the dish while she did the dishes, things like that. And it got lost, and then we were able to find it. So it's got this amazing story, right, that it's connected to the enslaved community in multiple ways, both in where it must have originated and how it came here, and then also with the oral history providing even more context for it, for that kind of stone being connected to the descendants and to the people who are enslaved there.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a pretty incredible story to find something that the current descendants still know about through their oral history. They were like, oh, wait, no. Because I remember my grandmother told me a story about somebody had lost a bead. And it was just like, wait a minute, to find a thing that was lost century.
Yeah, I think they're different objects.
Yeah.
I mean, the ring, like, it's a ring, like,
yeah. It
I'm
looks
pretty
like
sure,
it looks like a
pretty
ring.
sure it's a
I
ring.
know,
So I don't think we found the bead, but
Yeah.
the story is that, like, what that does is it tells us that kind of stone, right? That was something that their ancestors had, right? So there being a ring and a bead is not a. It also helps us tell us that probably belonged to an enslaved individual.
Right, absolutely.
Right.
Making
That building that we found it in was a kitchen after 1808 to 18 probably 30. We don't know what it was. We also know that we believe it was the house where James Madison's father moved to and was his starter home before the main house was built. So there's always a kind of like, who owns the stuff that's in this building? And then there's like a 50-year gap where we don't know what the building was. We don't know what its function was. Was it because there was another kitchen that used to be right next to it. So it wasn't a kitchen prior to 1808. But was it a laundry? Was it an office? Was it like a,
Right.
we don't know. So
Okay, so to my next point, what is digging and like literally getting your hands into the dirt? What does that change about your understanding of history? I mean, it's one thing to read about it, but it's another thing to dig it up.
yes, digging is my favorite part. Again, it's physical, so I just love that I get to be outside. I get to be connected to the earth. I get to feel the dirt. I get to physically see my progress. Right.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like a kid.
I I have ADHD, so like the dopamine rush of art, it's like if you think of every trowel stroke as like a TikTok swipe, right? Like the
Yeah.
next video is going to be the funniest thing, or like is going to change my life, or is like, right, like that's what you're waiting for, right? Is whatever that
Mhm.
little video is that never comes, right? Every trowel swipe is like the next one, we're going to find the Cornelian ring, right? The thing that makes all of this make sense, right, is gonna pop up when I this trowel stroke. Nope. Okay, the next one, it's gonna, so I can really lock in when I'm excavating. So like on a personal level, like that all just makes my body feel good, right, in
Yeah.
my brain. It's very soothing for me, and so I love that aspect. As far as, I mean, the moment of discovery of finding something is just it happens all the time, and there just aren't a lot of disciplines or a lot of experiences where like I can make 100 discoveries in one day. Right,
Right.
every nail, every, right.
Yes,
And
I had like 6 on my first dig, and it
right.
made me wanna find more things.
Yep. And if you think about each one of those as an individual discovery, because they are,
Yeah.
right, like what a day. Like that's pretty good for a day.
Yeah, that was my
Six,
first time in the dirt,
six
and I
things
was
we
just like,
didn't know.
"What?
Like we didn't
Wow."
know those 6 things when we started, and
Mhm.
now we do. We know 6 more things, and you get to touch it, and you get to feel it,
Yeah.
and then there's that physical connection, not just to the object, but that is a portal to the past, right? You just immediately get transported, and the last person,
That's
you guys
that
talked about this with Keenan, but it's absolutely true, and the last person to have touched that thing was a person in the past, right? And at Montpelier, 99% of the time, that was probably an enslaved African American who touched that thing last. Even if it's James Madison's trash, he wasn't out there. He didn't take the garbage out every day,
right. Yeah.
right? So it's I mean, that's as close as you're gonna get, right, to shaking hands with a person in the past, with someone who was enslaved on that plantation. That's as close as you're gonna get, right?
Mhm.
And we find toothbrushes.
Yeah.
That thing was in someone's mouth.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't get much more intimate
Yeah. Absolutely.
than that, right? So that's the, like, that's where it becomes really powerful for me, and for people who are for for other archaeologists, and then certainly for people who are coming on the program, right? And it sometimes it takes people a minute, right? It's like, because they're like, is this a thing? Is this a thing? Is this a thing? Right? And so it's one thing to be like, that is a thing. That isn't, like, you found a nail, right?
Yeah.
And then they're excited about just like finding a thing. But then when you say that nail was last touched by, that's when you see like people's heads kind of
Yeah.
explode. And so again, I like my discipline more than all the other ones, but it's one of the things that makes archaeology really unique, and you get to do that just all day.
Yeah. No, I
And
definitely felt that when I was there. I definitely felt, I mean, just the excitement, just what am I gonna pull out of the ground next? Like,
yep,
what is it? Is it gonna be something big? Is it gonna be something bigger than the last thing? Right? And so there is that, I think, that drive to find more things, especially once you find one thing.
yep.
So I definitely felt that as well.
And I hope that we were able to get across that, right, we love the things, right, but it's not just the thing, it's the thing in relationship to all the other things,
Yeah.
right? It's where you found the thing, and it's what that thing is with.
Mhm.
That's what tells us the story, right? This, we call it context.
I was gonna say the
Archaeology is,
context. Yeah.
yeah, archaeology is all about preserving context, right? We are destroying our data as we dig, right? We call it destructive science. You can't put dirt back in the ground the same way it
You
was.
took it out. Yeah.
You've dug it. It is forever changed. So that's why we take so many notes and we write everything down and we take a million pictures and we draw maps and we do all of this data recording because we need to preserve where you found that thing, what else you found that thing with, what layer of soil you found it in, right? So that we can look at all that data, all that information together. That helps us figure out how to tell time. When did certain events happen? Where are certain events occurring, right? So the swept yards in the South Yard being a really great example of that, right? If we'd just done excavations there and not figured out where everything was, we wouldn't have known that since we dug in excavation units and we recorded where all the stuff came from and what unit it came from, right? So we make the whole site a grid and then we dig each of those grid squares and everything is, all the artifacts are kept with those squares. We can make a map that shows you that in between, in the spaces in between the homes that were set across from each other, so the space that is my face right now, right? We didn't find many artifacts here. We found all the artifacts pushed out to the sides and in between structures and next to structures. And that suggests that we're seeing swept yards being made, right? So that they're keeping the yard space clean because so much of their life was spent outdoors and using that space. So there's real practical reasons to keep garbage out of it, right? You don't want your kids stepping on broken glass and things like that. And like you want to care for your space. But there's also spiritual connections to that. We know that the practice was also sweeping away spirits, bad spirits, right? There was, and then there's also a visual that they change that space. It becomes hard, compact clay. There's no grass there. So it's also a visual way that they're also sort of claiming more space, right? They're saying this yard's like it's not just the inside of this building. Like we're also like, this is also our space. Like this is where we live is also this yard. So when you're an enslaved person who technically doesn't own anything, right, to be making claims on space is a really powerful act. And so without recording context, right, we don't learn those things, right? We just know that they had stuff.
Right. Absolutely. So you talked about pulling things out of the ground and you can discover 100 things every day. What are some of the discoveries that have surprised you the most or have had the most profound impacts on you?